Japan ranks top of the world on gender parity in educational achievement. In politics, the country is almost rock bottom. Japanese women hold just 10% of parliamentary seats. There are laws to change that at all levels, but no penalties, so little progress. Hence the debate about a strict quota. In the business world, Japan's Prime Minister has ordered the government to start increasing the number of female executives in big companies to 30% or more by 2030. Afia Iri is part of a new generation of Japanese politicians. She won a seat in Parliament last election as member of the ruling Liberal Democrats. A woman of Uyghur origin, she advocates for diversity and gender equality in Japan. I asked her what drew her to politics.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. And it's exactly what you mentioned. I was working as a United Nations officer just a year ago. And within my work at the UN, one of my jobs was to really track democracies within my portfolio and to really track diversity and representation within the countries I was assigned to analyze. For me, it was South Asia. But I noticed during my time there that even in my home country, Japan, where I believe we have an advanced democracy, we still weren't seeing, the faces of Japanese people being represented at all. And it's not just gender, right? Gender-wise, only 25% of our upper house is women. Just about 10% of our lower house is women. And obviously, almost half of our population is women. So gender is a big issue, but also within the men that are being represented, we are extremely overrepresented by men who come from a specific generation with a specific economic background. Japan already is a very diverse country. And when I say Japan is diverse, it's a little different from how diversity might be viewed in the West, for example. Diversity in Japan is, I think, so much more about, the regions you come from, the life experiences you've had, the upbringing you've had, the Japan that you've experienced, and the identities and skill sets and, career tracks that you represent and carry with you. And right now, a lot of this wealth of diversity here in Japan, wealth of the Japanese people, is not being represented. And I think the only way out is really for us to, encourage candidacies from diverse populations and not just, obvious diversity like women or, Japanese people with foreign backgrounds or multi-backgrounds like myself, but Japanese people who come from, all across our country and who come from all walks of life and carry with them all kinds of skill sets and perspectives.
So tell me, how difficult or restrictive is it doing business with a whole lot of old men? How tough is it to break into that club?
I wouldn't phrase it that way, but it is, it is a group that is overrepresented, as I said, by men of a specific age group, right? And also a specific family and economic background. But being within the LDP and having run as an LDP candidate twice and now having been elected, I've been incredibly pleasantly surprised by how unanimously shared this this opinion is that we need more representation in our politics. I think one of the strengths of the LDP is that although we are overrepresented by older men, they do recognize that we need younger voices. They recognize that we need women's voice. They recognize that our diversities are wealth. And they've been incredibly supportive and encouraging of my own candidacy and my path here. And I very much look forward to learning from everybody within the LDP, including the women too, the very few women who I very much respect and admire.
Being supportive and actually making sure that the system is changed are two different things, though. What about a quota system for female lawmakers? Is that something that Japan is going to need, seeing as it does rank lowest among the world's big economies on that front?
Now, that's a really good point. I absolutely agree on that front, that being supportive is different from actually obtaining results. In that sense, in the previous election we had for the upper house last summer, the LDP has set a target to have 30% of 30% of all candidates to be women. I think it's an encouraging sign that we've set that target and met that target. But I also personally find 30% to be quite low. I think we need to get to 50. And these kinds of targets, I think, within the party, I think is necessary. But in terms of quotas to fill in these spots, I would be a little more careful on that, just because I believe that, within our democracy, voters should have a choice of being able to vote for the candidates that they want to vote for, regardless of the candidate's gender or their identities, right? And in that sense, I think representation is important, but I'm a little careful on setting a quota there.
Lastly, when it comes to your career in politics, how would you like to see Japan deal with China, for example, on its oppression of Uyghurs, considering your Uyghur background?
No, thank you for that question. What is happening in the Uyghur region and to the Uyghur people, not only in China, but across the globe? And I say across the globe because even for Uyghurs who live abroad, they live with the grief of not being able to meet their families, speak to their families. Some live with the threat, under the threat of being surveilled and threatened even abroad. And I truly, truly believe that what is happening in the region today is one of the greatest human rights crises of our time. It is a test to all of our democracies and to our partners who believe in values of democracy and human rights and fundamental rights for all. And I definitely would like to see Japan do more with this issue. We need to outline a human rights due diligence framework within our supply chain, both for imports and exports. I think we need to make sure that Japanese exports are not being used, in favor of human rights violations. And I think we also need to make sure that we're not importing goods that are produced through forced labor, for example. I think that Japan, because it is a country that, even amongst the G7, I think maintains, healthy relationships with Asian countries and Middle Eastern countries. I think there's so much more that Japan could do to be a bridge builder, to be a negotiator, to be an in-between diplomatic power, and I look forward to that developing. It would be incredibly influential if Japan could establish institutions or academic institutions within Japan to preserve a Uyghur cultural heritage and Uyghur academia that is especially under threat under the current situation.
Avia Eri, thank you so much for your take on all of those topics, and good luck in your pursuit in your career.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me.